What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to another Black Desert video. So today we are going to be talking about Awakening Dark Knight. And a few weeks ago, Dark Knight actually got buffed, and the Awakening spec in particular. And so in those 2 weeks, I did a little bit of testing in both PvE and PvP to the point where I think I know enough to talk about it. So I'm just going to show you what I did with the Succession line. We're going to go over, skills, add-ons, Rabams, or skill enhancements, things you should use. But also, before we do that, I guess let's just talk about what do I think Awakening is good for. Like, if you are playing this game for fun, you don't care about trash loot, or you're just like, you like the class because it's flashy, I think Awakening is pretty good. Succession, I still do feel like is a little bit better in terms of damage output, but it also depends what you're doing. So like when people ask me, is this spec of Dark Knight good for PvP, I usually have to tell them like, what kind of PvP are you doing? 1v1s, Node Wars sieges, Arena of Solaire, or recently the Guild League, which is what I think is it's actually good for. So yeah, I think that it really just depends on what you do. Do I think Awakening is in a good spot right now? Yeah, I think so. It's not as good as Succession, but I think it's, a little bit of a different play style, and I think it's fine. It's just, if I were to give you an estimated number, I don't know like off the top of my head by actuals, but I would say probably about, 5 to 10% weaker than Succession. So you'll notice that in trash loot numbers if you compare it. But anyway, with that said, let's talk about Awakening a little bit more. Yeah, so I actually prefer Awakening over Succession because back in the day when I first played it, it was, the class I picked because it was flashy before Succession was even an option in the game. So it's actually cool to go back to it and see what's happening. But yeah, anyway. So the skills I have locked are basically the same thing I have for Succession, which is Hidden Strike, or the Hidden Ultimate Absolute Darkness, and Sudden Strike is locked. Same with Evasion, Spirit Satiation, Split Second, and I think that's about it for locks. Awakening, you keep everything. Skill enhancement, same as Succession. The reason why I do this is because Wrath of Vidir, I think this is one of those ones where either option could be good depending on what you do. So I use Wrath of Vidir for the extra recovery, whereas I think Shadow Strike would actually be good for pulling. So like instead of your Shift E, you could use Shadow Strike to pull things as well. So either option I think is good. I just prefer the extra recovery in those emergency moments. Unveiled Fate is for the attack speed and the minus 20 damage reduction, always nice for PvE. And then Balance Strike is, kind of the same in Succession. I have it, but it's one of those filler skills that I don't really use. Plus, it's on a 35-second cooldown to the point where you don't really use it. All right, add-ons. So doing add-ons for Awakening was a lot different from Succession in the point of there are some skill, like a lot more skills have full 100% crit and on Awakening, but you still do need, a little bit for your main hand. So getting crit, you probably want to have at least 2 of them, and these are your main abilities. Spirit, like a lot of these are just your Awakening, and you don't really use main hand as much, but sometimes you do, but you still want that crit. One thing that's flexible, you could swap out Spirit Hunt. This is the ability you would use to switch from main to Succession or main hand to Awakening, and we'll talk about that in the rotation. And then basically all of these are your big damage abilities once your buffs are up. So either way, you could swap these out. I was still playing around with it. You could probably add another back attack. The ideal thing that I want is pretty much you opener with crit rate up, and then you could swap this out if you don't need the damage plus 20, and then you buff up with back and crit damage, and then movement speed is always nice. But if I were to change anything, what would I change? You could swap out Spirit Hunt for Twilight Dash, that's always a good one. I've seen people use Trap of Vidir because this one is a not too long of a cooldown, but ideally we want to get 7 to 12 second cooldown abilities on here. So I think Grip of Grudge is also a good one. Trap of Vidir is, you know, not really your first choice, but it's an option. And then Twilight Dash is, I think, is a very solid one as well that you could swap out Spirit Hunt for. And ideally everything else is like a core mandatory, like Spirit Legacy, Shattering, Seed, Cluster, and Nebula are basically mandatory. So aside from that, you just swap out like what works for your rotation. It looks like I have a lot of overlapping ones, but I've been playing with it. So if there's anything that you could swap out, like let's say you think you have too much crit damage, what you could do is probably stack another back, depending on the spot. Like if you're grinding Stars End, you could always do down, or just anything else you think you might need. But realistically, you just want to have your crit and back for PvE uptime as close to 100 as you can. Okay, with that said, let's talk about the skills. So we're not really going to be talking about the main ones. If you want to know which ones are the good ones, watch my Succession video, because it's the exact same thing. But yeah, let's talk about Awakening. So your Overlord is the equivalent of the Succession E-buff, and it's functionally the same thing. I feel like for all classes, they should, you know, kind of get rid of this or replace the Elvia ability with something else, because most people just aren't doing Elvia grind spots these days anymore. And for the 1% of people who are, you don't even really use this that regularly anyway. So Shattering and then Flow, all of this one. So what I have on here is attack cast speed and damage reduction. You would fire this one off first before your seed, and then back and crit. So you basically just have all of them. So the core skill that I had, I think that's what they call these. There are a few options depending on what you're doing. If you are a PvEer, PvPer, if you are learning the class, I would honestly pick Seed of Catastrophe for most people, because it just gives you super armor. And for most people, just having another protected skill is really nice to have. What I've seen other people do, if you're PvPing, Shattering is a very solid one because it stiffens the enemies, which allows you to flow more combos into people in, you know, PvP situations. Like I've seen people use Spirit Hunt as well as Stiffness when you're flying through enemies or just people in general. You would go in opener with your Spirit Hunt to get into Awakening, and then you Stiffness them and then fire off your combo. But I think for most people, PvE especially, Seed of Catastrophe is just one of the safest options. That's why I have it. But if you're a PvPer, Shattering is probably the option for you, or, you know, Spirit Hunt or Spirit Legacy. But either way, I'd probably just choose Shattering or Seed. All right, so with that said, let's start off with the rotation as usual. I lined this up a little bit to the point where people can see it as well. And let's go over this real quickly. So before we actually do that, you can opener with Unveiled Dagger, because this will give you 10% attack speed for 10 seconds. This is your pre-buff, essentially. And then you could also go with your Rabams skill down here, your Unveiled Fate, because it also could give you a 10% attack speed. So whichever one is like not on cooldown, use that one. But also it minus 20 damage reductions the enemy. So basically you opener with that, you're debuffing the enemy, buffing yourself, and then you could flow it with the Nebula skill, which actually or the Blooming Black Rose, and then that flows with a lot of other abilities. Next, we have our Spirit Hunt. This is like these three abilities are your main hand weapons. So Spirit Hunt will put you in Awakening, and this is essentially starting your combo for Awakening. And then you opener with a Spirit Legacy. This is the one where you basically, like, you know how I picked this one. You could open with your crit rate and then start firing off damage with your big skills and keeping your buffs up with that one. So Spirit Legacy, Shift R and B, open with that one, and then you flow it with Cluster of Despair. I actually really like this ability. I wish Succession had it, but it is what it is. So then that boosts your movement speed, and then your crit damage is up, and then you hold Shift Q with your Nebula, and then you fire off your the Shattering, Flow, Seed, Flow, and then you could Spacebar, Grip of Grudge. These 6 over here are kind of your fillers. These are situational. You don't have to put them in any particular order. It's just extra damage when your main like 10 skills are off cooldown. So if you learn anything, so basically take these 10 or 12 skills over here, or I guess it's really 10 because these are prebuffs, main damage, fillers. So let me show you this slowly before we do anything. So currently we are in main hand, right? So if you want to do this one, this will pre-buff you, or you could do that. This is also pre-buff you. And then here's where the combo shots. I'm gonna try to do it slowly so you guys can see it. So watch this order. So it's gonna go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then these are fillers depending on the situation. So let me do this slowly for you guys. So opening into Awakening, right? So now you have that. Then you would drop your Spirit Legacy and then hold RMB for your cluster. And then after your cluster, you Nebula. You could be behind the enemy as well. And then these are where you hold Shift E and then Shift L and B for your seed and cluster. These two abilities. I personally like Shattering more. So you open with Shattering and then seed these two and then hit your flows. And then like let's say you do that one and then hit your spacebar, and then after these skills you are doing whatever is needed is on cooldown. So, and then as always, like these two abilities are movement. So let me teach you a few skills and how they work. So right here we have a flow for Spirit Blaze. So ideally what the game wants you to do is Spirit Blaze into the flow. What you could do if you like depending on the situation, if you were to hotbar this one for example, what you would do instead of hitting the main Spirit Blaze, all you want to do is the flow because it saves time. So let me show you how it works. Like by default you do this one, that's one. You saw swing 1 and 2. You go through swing 1 in PvP, someone grabs you and then it cancels that out. But what you would do is go directly to the flow and then like knock them down with that one. You have to hotbar this one, but you skip the main Spirit Blaze. It's not a lot of damage. It's mostly just a knockdown. It's fine for PvE, but it's more of a PvP skill in my opinion. So then Grip of Grudge right here. We have this one. So it down attacks and then it recovers a little bit. It's more of a filler ability. So what you would do like right here, you would think it like pulls things towards you in a way, but that's just like a filler damage when everything is on cooldown. Twilight Dash, you know, this is different because in Succession you have to hotbar this. In Awakening it's actually a skill key, which is F by default. It's something you have to get used to. And then this one, this Trap of Vidir, how do we use this one? So it's down F. Now what I see people doing is like, this is how it works, right? I personally use it as more of an escape from a situation, right? So let's say you pull a group of enemies together, just in PvE, pull a group of enemies, you do that, and then you make some distance and then start sending off your abilities. Or if you are in PvP, like let's say you get, you fight a group of enemies, you go into the ball and then you do that and then you just get out of it and just kind of make sure you're at a distance when you're firing off all the abilities and everything. So the difference between Succession and Awakening. Succession is more melee in your face. Awakening is more ranged, as you guys can see with, like, you know, your main abilities. You're firing off things at a range mostly. And when you're in melee range, the enemy should be knocked down, stiffened, CC'd in some sort of way. So if you're like behind an enemy, it's because you already CC'd them to the ground and they can't really do anything to you. So that's more or less the playstyle. Obviously, PvP is very situational. Like, teamwork is a big thing involved. But yeah, so it's kind of like a mix of whatever you're doing. But those are how you use the skills. So basically, if you look at this once again, the opener with your Spirit Hunt right here, which is your WRMB, and then you get as many buffs as you can. These, honestly, a lot of these are changeable. You could do damage on here if you wanted to, but anyway, want to make sure you're buffed up and then launching all your big damage abilities. So over here, but that's the rotation. I know these look like a lot of skills to learn, but just know that, like, the first 3 over here are your pre-buffs, and then this one's a flow. Once you hit your Spirit Hunt, it puts you in Awakening. That's when you start landing all your abilities. So yeah, to give you an idea. And then one thing you could do, I noticed this in Succession a little bit more, is your Phantasmal Snare. Now, this is one of the things where it's used ideally for a movement, like situationally, let's say AD or DF, like you move them back and forth, it sends you in a direction. But what you could do is use it as a cancel for some of your abilities as well. That's what you do in Succession when you want to fire off your what is that ability? Yeah, so your Obsidian Ashes with your Shift E, if you are on main hand, you could have this hotbar. Well, I guess yeah, quick slot, let's say you put it over here, right? And let's say you want that one, and then it just kind of sends it over. But those are more like, you aren't really on your main hand as much. There are a few things to pre-buff yourself, and you could also, like, the reason why you're on main hand while you're on Awakening is to do your CCs. Pre-buff and CCs. Awakening is where all your damage is, and then your fillers are these. So, like, let's say you're doing that, and then, you know, your Shift X, those are your recoveries. And yeah, okay, so that was the rotation. If you just want to look at it, you can see all these skills, just know all of that is there. And let's talk about some Reforge stones, because this is a little bit different than Succession, actually. I still use this one for PvE. What I think you can change, though, is you could probably, instead of having triple crit rate, you could get away with 2 crit rates and then 1 like all damage reduction or literally anything else if you wanted to. But for the sake of trying to get close to 100 on everything without having to think about it, I have 3. But unlike Succession, a lot of your main abilities right here are 100% crit rate by default. So that's actually good. You don't have to think about it as much. Your big damage is at 100. This one is at 50, where you do have to get, you know, to close to 100 as possible. So just keep that in mind. This one is a 50. Yeah, let me see. Yeah, all the main ones are basically 100, and then Spirit Hunt 50, Cluster 50, and any other main ones which are a little bit less relevant. But Cluster is actually a big damage one that you probably have to think about. So keep that in mind. When you're full buffed and max crit rate, assuming you're buffed, this is a bad scenario because I don't have like full buffs going on, but you would have 50 plus 18, and then you would have another like 10 or 15 depending on what you want, and then your other crit rate comes from any other buffs you have going on. So very close. It's like 100 or very close to it, and you should be fine. But if you only want to use 2 of them, or you only have 2 of them, that's fine too. But yeah, overall, Dark Knight, what do I think of it? I think it's, you know, it's better than it was before. So I'll just answer it. How is it in PvE? I think it's fine. It's a little like 5 to 10% worse than Succession, but it really just depends. I play this game for fun. PvP. If you're doing Arena of Solaire, which is 3v3, I think Succession is better. If you're doing Guild League, which is the event running for 2 weeks now, which is a 10v10 for your guild, I think Awakening is better. If you're doing small scale Node Wars, either one goes. Like, and then if you're doing Sieges, you probably want to play Awakening, because when you're doing like 100 versus 100, if you're in melee range, you're literally just going to get CC'd by literally everything. So yeah, being at range when there's more than like 5 or 10 people, Awakening will probably be nicer. But if you're doing small scales like 1v1, Battle Arena, Red Battlefield, you can get away with either one and just do just fine. So yeah, either way, that's all I wanted to talk about. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Before we wrap up, I wanted to just show you all the skills and how I set mine up. So right here, if in case you guys want to see the key combos and everything, this is how I set it up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. So F, flow, and flow this one with an RMB, shift RMB. In Succession, you have to hotbar this one. Thank God this is just the key combo this time around. Nebula, shift Q. Into this one is shift LMB and then shift E. You kind of have to remember that order depending on what you're doing. I like shattering first and then seed, but like, does it really matter? I don't think so. Like, very minimally at least. Grip of Grudge, shift F. Spirit Blaze, I'd recommend hotbarring this one and just doing the flow damage directly. Spirit Hunt to get into your main damage is WRMB. Cluster you hold with the flow. And then Soul Snatch is one you have to like learn, because you do it after ability. It's spacebar by default. I just rebound mine. This one, Touch of Exploitation, people probably won't get it. So you like, let's say you do something and then you go, and then that's what it looks like. So it's like a slash. But anyway, that's basically the rotation. Prebuff, big damage line, fillers, and situational. And that's all I have. So with that said, thanks so much for watching. Just know that the add-ons, I'm still kind of tweaking it, but what you really want is things to buff yourself up to 100 crit rate, debuffing the enemies with -20, back and crit or down attack if depending on your spot, but back and crit damage at high priorities, movement speed on something that isn't a 12-second cooldown, just so you can have that up 100% of the time. Movement speed is always good. And then change these crit damages to whatever you think is, you know, good for your situation. Like maybe another back attack or down, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys have a fantastic day. If you have any questions, drop in the comments. You can join the Discord as well. And if you want to watch the Succession video, I'll leave that in the description. And that one is like, we talk about the same things we did here, but the Succession form. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.